What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and we're back for another episode of the third-person action RPG tutorial series. In this episode, I want to go over pause menus and pausing our game. So pausing our game is very important, of course. Anytime you want to take a break, you're going to pause your game. It's a simple and really useful mechanic or tool that goes into pretty much every single game that exists. We're going to implement this live today, but essentially you should be able to press an input on your keyboard, such as the P key or the start button on a controller, and you're going to be able to pause your game. And then when you pause your game, the actual world around you is going to stop. And we can really showcase this by looking at this rotating wall when we do it to make sure that everything is working. And then from there, we will be able to implement different parts of the pause menu and it will go smoothly. But before we hop into that, if you like what you see and you want to get caught up in the entire series of our action RPG with our weapons, our hit scan, our NPCs, and a whole lot more, I'll link you to the entire third-person tutorial series right here in the top right corner so you can check out all those mechanics. Alternatively, if you don't care about that and you only care about the pause menu, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to follow the whole series to watch this pause menu episode. I do recommend that you watch how we set up our main menu because it is a very similar process. But it will help you understand why in-game menus are different from menus that are for getting the user into a game, like how the main menu is different from a pause menu. You have extra considerations when you're in-game. So I'll link that episode right here in the top right corner as well. And with that out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. Now this is a code and blueprint tutorial series. We're going to be focusing mainly in the blueprints today because we're going to make our pause menu widget. Then we're going to assign some behavior to it. We can also spawn it and control it from the code, which is something fun that we can show. So first things first, let's go create our pause menu. I'm going to put it in blueprints, widgets. In here, I will add a new widget. You can do so by going to add user interface, and it's being cut off a little bit at the bottom here. Or if we go into our content browser and right click, we can see user interface and we want to select widget blueprint. Now if you're in UE4, this is enough and it's going to automatically make one. You just have to name it whatever you want. But if you're in UE5, then you have to pick the parent for your user widget. The default is just user widget and that will work for what we're doing. So user widget, and I'm going to call it pause menu. Then we can go into it. So here's our pause menu. Now, since we're in UE5, we don't have anything in here. If you're in UE4, you will start with a canvas panel. I will start with a canvas panel because we typically make everything work with a canvas panel for scaling. It's very simple to do. So feel free to add that or another container in here, whatever you're comfortable with working with. And here's our working area for our pause menu. Now we can just design the pause menu however we want. So first thing I like to do a lot of time is just put a background image on it. So we can call this background image, and we can anchor it to the entire size of the parent container. So what this does is it automatically positions it and sizes it where the anchor is. So doing the full parent element means it's going to take up the entire size of that. And if you hover over some of these elements like this, you can see it's taking up 100% on the width and height of this canvas panel. But we have offsets in here, and these offsets are here because they try to keep the object that you're anchoring in the exact spot that it already was. But in this case, we don't want that anymore. We want to set these offsets to 0. That way this background image takes up the entire thing. Additionally, I want to go to my background image and change the Z order to -1. This will make it render behind all the other objects on the widget. So if we add text to it, buttons, they're going to render on top of it. If you have an image for this, great. I usually just do simple colors for the tutorials here, so I can go to my color and opacity and appearance, and then I can make these colors whatever I want. So if I change the A value, the alpha, it becomes semi-transparent, so 0.5 is 50% transparent. Then I can change the other values if I want. So if I wanted this to be black, I could put all these values to 0. It's just a black overlay over the screen at this point. Now, again, make it whatever you want. Use colors, use an image. Don't use any background image. That's perfectly fine, but that's how I'm doing it. Now, we don't have to change anything else in here. We also don't need the background image to be a variable unless you intend on changing it out. For this very simple example, we don't need to, but maybe we could in the future. Next, I like to make what I call a title. So I drag some text into the canvas panel, and we'll click on this, and we will call it pause menu title or pause menu text. Then I will anchor this to the top center of the widget, which puts the anchor point here. That's what this little symbol means. Then remember what I mentioned, it tries to keep it in the position that it was. So if you want to update it to the new position, you just zero out the position here. And you can see it placed it there. But the origin of the text is the top left, not the center of the text box. So to fix that, you can change the alignment. The alignment changes the pivot point or the origin of the widget. So if you just go to the alignment and go to 0.5, and you can do it for the height as well. So 0.5, 0.5. Now the text is directly centered in the widget. So a couple things here. First of all, let's change this to say Pause Menu. And it makes it, looks good. He's a little bit too high up, so let's position this down like 80 units. That looks pretty good. Then you can manually change the size of this if you want. So if you want it to take up a certain amount of X or Y distance, we can say size X is whatever, 200. I could change it to that. Or I could revert this back to default and select size to content. In this case, since this widget really isn't going to be changing, it's just displaying the text, size to content is perfectly fine. Another thing I like to do is go to the font and go to the outline settings and go to outline size and give it an outline. Sometimes 2, sometimes 4. I think it looks pretty nice. But choose whatever you want. Once you have your settings that you want, I would also make the text size bigger, which is also in font, and we can make it, say, 48. It's probably still too small, so maybe 72. And that looks pretty good. So now we have our pause menu here. When I'm starting my menus, before I have a real design for them, I like to go with a very, very simple design of just adding buttons, typically 3 buttons. I'm actually only going to start with 1 button because I'm just going to copy and paste this one when I get it into a state that I want. But you'll see we have a button here. I'm going to call this Resume Button. And then I will go to Anchors, anchor at top center, zero out my position, set my alignment to 0.5 and 0.5. Change the size of this to, say, 450. And we'll change the size Y to 100 or 90 maybe. Then we can position them down as far as we want. So let's say 200 as a starting point. Let's do 250. That looks pretty good. That would probably work right there. You can move it down a little bit more if you want. 275 might look even better. Now we have our button, and of course you can change anything about it that you want, from a style to an image or just a color. For this first episode, we'll leave it as is, and I'll just add some text to it. So I'm going to drag some text onto my resume button here and call this resume button text. Now this looks pretty good, but let's increase the size of this text. 48 is probably fine. Let's see if it will fit resume. There we go. So for pause, when we press this button, we're going to resume. Again, you know I like my outlines. So 2 or 4, pretty good. 4 is really bold, but that also works here. And now we have this button, so I can copy it and just paste it in the canvas panel, and we have another button here. So this one is going to be options. I'll say options button. Or settings. I think settings button works either way. I'm going to change my position X to 0, but my position Y, I will move it down a little bit more. Let's try 375, 425. 425 looks pretty good. So then we can go to our resume button text 1 here and change this to settings button text. And put the text as settings. Then everything else is good in here. And then we can copy this one and paste it in the canvas panel one more time. And this time it will be our quit button. So this is how we're going to return to the main menu. We want to set our position X back to 0, and the difference in these buttons, we went from 275 to 425, which is 150. So we can add 150 to 425, which gets us 575. Now we can go to our settings button text 1 and change this to quit button text, and change the text to quit. And there we go. We have our pause menu, and it's looking pretty nice. At this point, we can start filling out the behavior of the menu. So if we go into the graph, we have a few events here. I'm going to get rid of them. I'm going to manually bring up event construct. When this menu is constructed, we can pause the game. You can also do it just on input of whatever key it is that you want, and not when this menu is constructed. It is up to you. But a simple way to do it in event construct here is just to set game paused. It is a blueprint node that you can use here, and you can just plug it in. So the game is paused when we enter this menu. Very, very simple. It does most of the work for us right off the bat. Then we have to fill out what our buttons do. So the settings menu, I'm going to skip for now. We will eventually have settings, and this will work. But I'm going to focus on resume and quit. So if we click on our resume button here and scroll down, we have events. These are things that we can trigger and fill out logic for. So I like to use on pressed for my buttons. This means if I click on it, this means if I select it while it's focused, say with a controller or with the enter key or whatever the case may be, then I can do the logic in this event. So if we press the little plus sign next to it here, we get the event in the graph. And from here, we can just call set game paused, but this time we want pause to be off, false by default. Very simple, right? So when we resume, we're not pausing it, but additionally, we want to remove this widget from the viewport. So remove from parent. The parent is the viewport. So when we remove this, the pause menu is no longer going to be up or active. Then you can go back here and you can add your on press for the settings menu now if you want. Again, I'm not going to fill it out today, but you can have it there if you want as a placeholder. And then we go back and go to the quit button and add that on pressed as well. And the behavior you want to do here is up to you. A very simple one would be to just open level. And you can open it by name, and we want to open our main menu level. I know this because this is the level I start on, main menu, and it is spelled and capitalized like that. So when we quit, we're just going to open the main menu. Now transitioning to another level will unpause the game, so you don't manually have to say set game pause false, but you could do that here as well if you want, just so it is clear what's going on. And now we have our menu. So if we are able to spawn this menu, and we can do it pretty much however we want, then we should see these things working. Now again, we're going to want to press an input to spawn this. So if we go to Edit, Project Settings, go to Input. If you're using Enhanced Input, you can use Enhanced Input here. You don't have to use the old input system that I'm using. Still have in the series. And I can go over here and add an action mapping. And we can call it start. You could call it pause, but start could be used for a couple of different things. So I think that's good. And you'll see I don't have anything like that anywhere else. We can press this here to get the input that we want to bind to that, which is going to be the P key. So the start input is the P key on a keyboard. And we do support gamepad inputs in our game. So you'll see that for a lot of our inputs, we do have them, like ping is 5 or gamepad left shoulder, roll is R, gamepad face button right. We have a lot of them in here. So swap shoulder, we did not make a gamepad input for, and start, we don't have one for. We should add one for both of these. For start, it's easy. We can add this and switch this to gamepad, I think it's called special right. There we go. And that is the start button on an Xbox 360 controller. And although it's not part of this episode, the previous episode we implemented shoulder swapping. We should have a way to change this in here as well. Common one is clicking in one of the sticks on a 360 controller. So we can actually do that if we come in here and say gamepad left thumbstick button. That means when you click the stick in, that's your button. So there we go. When we click the stick in, we will be able to swap shoulders. Now our inputs are good. And as a quick test to show what we're going to do, we can just go to the character blueprint and add this. We are going to do this in C++ for the series. But if we go to third person CBP, blueprints, characters, base character BP, we can come in here and right click and say start. And we want to find our start input action. Right here, it's an input action event. And on press, we can create widget. We can create the pause menu. And the return value, that is our widget that we created, we can call add to viewport to display it to the player's screen. We don't need to pass in an owning player here because we're going to do this in code. So this is just temporary, but if you did want to keep it this way, and that is fine for you, Then you can drag off of owning player here and get player controller. You should get the proper one if you have more than one. But for me, since this is single player right now, get player controller with index 0 works. And then I can compile and save and go to the main menu, play my game, go to the campaign, and I can pause at any point, like right here. And the pause menu comes up, and that's great. You'll see that the cinematic stopped because all the time dilation, all the tick rates got set to an inactive state, essentially. They basically said, don't tick anymore. You know, time is not moving forward. The game is paused. So then when I press the resume key here, it continues. And if I pause again, I can go to settings, and settings isn't going to do anything, but it would open up the settings menu. And then I can also go to quit, which is going to bring me back to the main menu. And then when I go into the campaign, you can see the game is no longer paused. And then I can do this as much as I want. So there you go, guys. That's how you can implement a pause menu in your game. Now, as I said, we're going to utilize this input in C++ to be able to create our pause menu and spawn the widget itself. But to do all that, we really need to set up our player controller. But for the third-person action RPG tutorial series, we have not yet implemented a player controller. We implemented basic behavior that a player controller could have, but it was really just on our character class. And that's been fine to this point, but since we want to control things other than this character, we want to send inputs to that pause menu widget, for example, we want to utilize our player controller. So the next few episodes are going to be going over creating a real player controller within Unreal Engine, binding the inputs in it, and then spawning our pause menu and navigating it that way. But I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, please subscribe and consider joining the Patreon, YouTube membership, and Discord subscriptions for extra benefits and to give me lots of love and support. Subscribing is completely free and it is the best thing you can do for the channel. It benefits me greatly and I really appreciate it. So thank you guys so much for everything. If you ran into any problems while following this episode on creating a pause menu, feel free to join the Discord community. There is a link in the description and I would be happy to help you out. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.